to Status Coup News. I'm Kim Brown, very excited to be joined with you and by you today on this Good Wednesday. This is April the 19th. We've got a lot in store on the program. A little bit later on the show, we are going to be joined with Reverend Raymond Green, a community organizer based out of Akron, Ohio, talking about the lack of a criminal indictment against 8 police officers who fired over 90 shots at Jayland Walker, a black man running for his life. Over 40 of those bullets actually entered Jayland's body, and there is going to be seemingly no accountability from the criminal injustice system surrounding that. We're going to speak with Reverend Green about the organizing and the actions that are happening now in Akron and what the community plans to do in order to move forward. But I want to begin the show, guys. First of all, what up, Status Coolers? Thank you all so much for being here. Come on in here, smash that like button, get on in here. We'd love to see you guys. And this is a very big issue that we want to discuss concerning abortion. Now, please don't let your eyes glaze over when we are talking about abortion, because if you are a uterus owner or you have any proximity to uteruses, this is absolutely an issue that affects you, because allegedly in America, we have a right to bodily autonomy. We have a right to privacy. We have a right to access to health care. But not for you bitches. No, you bitches don't deserve liberty. You deserve babies. In over half of the states in this country, there are restrictions on pregnant people accessing health care. And those attacks continue to come from the far right evangelical wing of the pro-life campaign, because today, from the Supreme Court, we were expecting a decision surrounding the access to misoprostol, which is one of the medications that people who are pregnant use in order to terminate a pregnancy without exactly going through a procedure per se. And a lower court judge in Texas ruled that the FDA took missteps in approving misoprostol over 2 decades ago. And the case has now been kicked up to the Supreme Court, which today decided to punt on announcing a decision and announced that they will instead release their ruling this Friday, 11:59 p.m. Did I read that right? That's just a coincidence. Surely they don't want to dump it into the news abyss, whatever their decision is. That doesn't give us good foreboding. But anywho, I'd like to introduce you to our guest today. Joining us is Garnet Henderson. Garnet is a staff writer for Rewire News. Garnet is also the host of the podcast called Access, which is a podcast all about abortion. It is available on Apple Podcasts. You need to go check it out and subscribe. Garnet, thank you so much and welcome back to Status Coup. I'm glad to see you again.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me back.
Garnet, we keep meeting under these incredibly dire circumstances, and I don't think we can ring the alarm enough about what is happening to abortion access, or what has happened, period, since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, when the Supreme Court ruled on the Dobbs decision last spring. And let's start out with what the Supreme Court did today. We were expecting a decision regarding the access to misoprostol, but now that has been delayed Friday, well after business hours. What are your thoughts about why the Supreme Court, I guess, decided to temporarily extend access, at least for a couple of more days, to the drug, and why they are waiting at that specific time to announce their ruling?
Sure. So mifepristone is the drug that's at issue in this case. It's one of 2 drugs used for medication abortion. And as you said, a federal judge in Texas ruled that the FDA should not have approved mifepristone as it did. He tried to block FDA approval of the drug entirely. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals then partially upheld him and basically said, you can't block the approval of this drug completely, but you can block changes from 2016 on, which would have theoretically allowed the drug to remain FDA approved, but with much stricter limitations and restrictions than it has right at this moment. And there's actually a competing lawsuit filed by the attorneys general of 17 states and Washington, D.C. They sued the FDA asking a judge to order them to do the opposite, to maintain the status quo, no changes. So that kind of conflict is exactly the situation in which the Supreme Court is supposed to intervene, right? When there's disagreement among lower courts on the federal level, because we're supposed to have uniform law in theory across all 50 states. So that's what happened. And so the Department of Justice asked the Supreme Court to weigh in. And there are a lot of things that they could do. So one of the possible outcomes is that they could just issue a longer stay and say nothing changes while this appeal and while these multiple lawsuits move their way through the courts. The fact that they extended this initial stay suggests they might not be planning to do that because somebody is probably writing an opinion. Now, we have no idea what's going to happen and which way they're going to rule, and that still could be the outcome, that they're going to issue a stay and somebody is writing an angry dissent. But it could be that they're going to allow this Fifth Circuit ruling to stand, which would mean these new limits would apply to mifepristone in some states, but not in those 17 and DC, or something else in between could happen. So it's chaotic, it's confusing, and that is exactly the point.
Give us an idea about how widely used mifepristone is by people who are seeking to terminate their pregnancies.
Well, over half of abortions in the United States now are medication abortions. And the FDA-approved protocol for medication abortion involves two drugs, mifepristone, the one that's at issue in this lawsuit, and a second drug called misoprostol. So misoprostol does work on its own to cause an abortion. So even if mifepristone access is severely curtailed, there will be an option for people who want to have medication abortions, which is to do a misoprostol-only abortion. And I think it's important for folks to know that. But yeah, this is a very widely used drug, used in probably over half or almost that of all legal abortions that happen in the United States. Plus, we know there are more abortions that happen when people order pills online and self-manage their abortions without clinical or medical supervision.
Let's talk about Garnet. As if the Dobbs decision wasn't bad enough, states where abortion restrictions are already on the books have even taken further steps to make things more challenging for access to abortion. Idaho has been in the news recently for enacting a law that would criminalize taking a minor, a pregnant minor, across state lines to receive abortion services. And I think they've classified this under the guise of human trafficking. I mean, something so extreme. And I want us to actually take a look at a couple of videos, some recent, some not so recent. One is from about a year ago after Idaho's abortion ban took effect. And the second video, and I believe these are two different patients, just in the interest of disclosure here for the audience. The second video is actually going to show, or rather we're going to hear audio of a woman in Idaho apparently experiencing a miscarriage. And the doctor had a conversation with her where you can just hear that the care that she literally needs to potentially survive this medical condition is going to be denied to her, and the precarious position that doctors are now being placed in about whether or not to do procedures that could actually save the life of the mother or preserve the health of the mother. So Colin, let's take a look at those two clips.
I'll probably delete this later, but I've been actively miscarrying since the 8th. I have gone to a doctor, and this is my second visit to the ER. If you're wondering why women's rights matter, I'm just gonna fucking bleed out on this table before somebody comes and actually helps me. This is my life. Nobody actually is coming down. They're always gonna send me home.
I'm just going to take the blanket away for a second.
I figured you would need to do that.
All right, I'm going to have you scoot on down towards me.
Okay, I've got all sorts of stuff here so I can scoot.
Okay. I mean, regarding DNC, I mean, there's, there is some Confusion regarding, not confusion, but some trepidation regarding, kind of Idaho's new abortion law.
Yeah.
So
it's just really lame because if they would have done this when I requested, they would have seen the baby, right? And I would be here today.
Yeah, I don't, I'm not exactly sure.
I have to say, I mean, just listening to that and watching that, I mean, is simply excruciating, Garnet. And this is the case. This is what's happening to thousands, perhaps maybe even millions of women across this country in states everywhere where these trigger laws went into effect, where even states went further to make abortion access even more restrictive. What are some of the anecdotal stories that you are hearing from women regarding access, or even worse, regarding deteriorating health because they're not able to get an abortion, or maybe can't afford to travel to get an abortion? What has been coming back to you story wise ever since the overturning of Dobbs? If you could give us a sort of cross section of what women and pregnant folks are reporting back to you.
Sure. Well, I would like to say that a lot of people were being denied abortions even when Roe versus Wade was in place, because so many states had so severely restricted access to abortion. And particularly when we're talking about emergency situations where people are showing up at hospitals thinking that they're going to get help there, because I think that's what we would all hope, that if you go to the hospital and you're having a medical emergency, they will help you. There are Catholic hospitals in the United States. 1 in 6 hospital beds is in a Catholic hospital, and they deny almost all abortion care. And a lot of non-Catholic affiliated hospitals have institutional policies that really limit abortion as well. So this was happening. We just weren't hearing about it as much. That said, now that abortion bans are so severe and so widespread, as you heard the doctor saying in that clip, they cause fear and confusion. So in a lot of states, doctors are not sure what they legally can and can't do, or in some cases, they've been given really conservative advice by the hospital's lawyers. I think probably more conservative than what the law even really dictates. And so I've certainly heard lots of stories of people having to travel really far from home just to get abortion care when they're having a miscarriage or some other kind of really serious complication of pregnancy. And because you mentioned Idaho, another thing that's happening in Idaho that will happen in more states is that several hospitals have announced that they're shutting down their OBGYN wards, their labor and delivery departments, because they don't have enough doctors who are willing to work in these states under these abortion bans that could send them to jail. Just for providing healthcare to their patients. So that's something we're going to see more and more of, is that people just have a total lack of access to any kind of obstetric care, whether it's for an abortion or just prenatal care for a pregnancy they want to continue. And of course, that puts their life in danger as well, not having access to that care close to home.
And that's an excellent point. I was watching an interview with a pro-life congressperson. Nancy Mace is a Republican from South Carolina. And she says she's pro-life, but sometimes she talks like she has some sense, because I think she is even in favor of up to a 15-week, which is way more generous than a lot of her conservative colleagues are. But one thing Congresswoman Mace pointed out in a recent interview was that in her home state of South Carolina, there are 14 counties, according to her, that do not have obstetrics, gynecologists, nothing. And what what are these bans, as you mentioned, doing just for women who want to have regular health care for their lady parts? Just to go to a gynecologist is going to be more onerous for women who live in these abortion restrictive states. And I can only imagine what the cancer rates are probably going to skyrocket, because a lot of that preventative care and preventative screenings are not going to be getting done. It seems as though a ban on abortion is going to have a cascading effect on women's health. And does anybody care?
That's absolutely right, because not only are practicing doctors leaving those states, medical students and residents are choosing not to train in those states because they're not going to get the kind of comprehensive training that they need. Abortion care is the same as care for miscarriage and emergency complications of pregnancy. So if you are not getting practice in that kind of care as an OBGYN resident, you are not becoming a competent doctor. And so a lot of doctors and doctors to be are choosing not to train in those states, which, by the way, medical residents provide a lot of medical care, and students. So again, that's less access to care for people who live in those states. And then, yeah, I mean, if you have to drive many hours just to go to an annual GYN visit, particularly if you maybe already have kids and are low income and can't get the time off work, you're just not going to do that. So that's going to affect people's health for decades, for their entire lifespans. And it also just makes pregnancy more dangerous. And our maternal mortality rates in the United States are already incredibly high, particularly for Black people. And so when we think about the same states that have banned abortion, a lot of them are the same states in the US that have the largest Black populations. So that crisis is also only going to accelerate when those people are forced to carry pregnancies to term.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis apparently has his eyes on the White House, I guess. I don't know. He's doing a bang up job of instituting fascism right there in his home state of Florida. I can't imagine him wanting to spread it to the rest of us in addition to what he's already done to Floridians there. But regardless, if you could pop up that piece from NBC News, Colin. So late last week, Governor DeSantis, as the headline indicates, quietly signs Florida's 6-week abortion ban into law. This bill was easily passed through the Republican supermajority in the Florida state legislature. And DeSantis, someone who is seeking the higher office, and proudly, prior to signing this bill into law, proclaimed that he would sign it. But as the NBC piece there indicates, he had it was no public signing ceremony, as with his previous trash legislation, like his anti-woke act, etc., where it was a big spectacle. No such spectacle for this ban. In fact, he went to Liberty University in Virginia, which we know is a conservative enclave notorious for its pro-life evangelical ideologies there, and he didn't even mention it. Let's talk about the ban first of all, and how abortion overall is popular. Garnet, like, people want to have access to abortion, and I'm not going to ask you about the political games here. Why are the Republicans doing XYZ? Ultimately, is to dominate and control women's bodies, and to make sure that not everybody has the freedom from tyranny that most Republicans would want their own constituents to have, but not even. So anyway, your thoughts about the DeSantis ban, because it does provide some exceptions. I think 15-week exception in the cases of rape or incest, and a couple of other exceptions. But most people who are seeking an abortion will not be able to obtain one in Florida after that 6-week mark.
Yeah, I also would like to point out that exceptions are essentially meaningless. Most of the time when abortion bans have rape or incest exceptions, they require that person to have reported it to the police or to provide other proof. We all know, or I hope we all know by now, that many victims of rape, especially young victims who might be victims of incest, have often not reported that to the police. And when they do, they're rarely believed. Medical exceptions are similarly useless for the reasons we talked about before. Doctors are afraid to provide the abortion, even if they know that it should fall into an exception, because they don't want to go to prison or get fined thousands of dollars. But that 6-week ban is not yet in effect. And it's important to understand that Florida actually used to be, relative to the rest of the southeastern United States, very liberal on abortion. Up until this time last year, abortion was legal there until 24 weeks of pregnancy. So it actually was a huge hub of abortion access for the entire Southeast. And then there was a 15-week ban signed exactly this time last year. And that ban is in effect, but it's being challenged. So whether or not this 6-week ban goes into effect is contingent on what the Florida Supreme Court decides about the 15-week ban. So it's really a waiting game to see what they're going to do about that. But if a 6-week ban goes into effect in Florida, I really can't overstate how devastating that will be for people in the Deep South. The closest place where they'll be able to access abortion beyond 6 weeks, the only southern states left will be South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. And abortion is actively under threat in all of those states. Just this month, a lawmaker in North Carolina changed parties from Democrat to Republican, handing Republicans the supermajority that they need there to pass abortion bans. So that, if those states were to ban abortion, the closest options would be New Mexico, Illinois, Kansas. But yeah, abortion is incredibly popular. Speaking of Kansas, which many people see as a very red state, voters overwhelmingly affirmed that they want abortion to be legal there. And then in the recent midterms, every single abortion-related ballot measure, there was a whole collection of them, went in favor of access to abortion. A majority of Americans believe abortion should be legal, including a majority of Republicans. And so I think that's where we see Republicans are under pressure from the really hard line corner of the anti-abortion movement to keep pushing. But they're realizing that what they're doing is no longer popular. And so I think that's why you see things like DeSantis still doing it, still signing that ban, but doing it literally in the middle of the night.
Well, we know that the Republicans are comfortable ruling from the minority, right? They are not bound by the will of the people. So what can we do here to fight back in terms of organizing in states where the abortion restrictions have already gone into effect, and then further restrictions and further criminalizing of people who seek abortion services are still being ballied about? What are you seeing in terms of the ways in which folks on the ground are resisting in the form of perhaps abortion funds? Or, it would be awesome if the Democrats actually decided to organize themselves politically in some of these deep red places where, if you take the temperature of the people are probably more progressive than Democrats give them credit for, but they just concede places in the Deep South and in the Mid South, especially, and in the Midwest. They just conceded to Republicans. They don't even bother to try and fight them in the state houses and trying to recapture back some of those seats. So in terms of activism and organizing, what are the ways in which you are seeing people respond on the ground to make sure that access is still being provided in some way?
Well, abortion funds in the states that are now abortion ban states, abortion funds there already had a lot of experience working under restrictions, because those were the same states that really severely restricted access to abortion before Roe. So they're certainly still working very hard to get folks whatever they need, if it means going out of state, if it means teaching people how to order abortion pills online so that they don't have to leave home. And, abortion bans are really a gerrymandering issue. As we've been discussing, legal abortion is popular, but we have so many states where Republicans control both chambers of the legislature and the governorship. And I think really, if we want our votes to count at all on that issue, fighting gerrymandering is going to be the next big battle. And then there are a lot of ballot measures, in states that either currently restrict abortion or are kind of at risk to become banned states. Lots of folks organizing to try and get ballot measures through to affirm the right to abortion in those states as well.
Where are some of those places, Garnet, so we can be looking ahead?
Yeah, Ohio is an example of that, where a pretty intense battle is unfolding over a ballot measure there. Ohio had, a 6-week ban that was blocked. And so right now abortion is legal in Ohio, but that 6-week ban is kind of hanging over everybody's head. Ohio in many ways has been a leader in restricting access to abortion. They've tried out a lot of laws there that then we saw be adopted in other states. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that ballot measure. The anti-abortion side is campaigning really, really hard against it already.
So In the case that the Supreme Court decides to side with this lower court judge in Texas, I know some states have already expressed, I'm thinking specifically of Maryland, the governor there, Wes Moore, said that the state is going to begin stockpiling misoprostone. And I imagine other states and probably organizations are going to be doing the same. Is what's going to take to make sure that people still get access to this drug, is to sort of go rogue and and do some underground railroad type stuff, but in on the side of reproductive access to abortion.
There's a way to go about it that is not rogue at all, because the FDA has discretion over how it enforces the law. So Congress has given FDA the power to determine whether or not drugs are safe and to regulate them. So the FDA could actually say, thank you for your opinion, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, but we are not going to enforce this ruling. It's called enforcement discretion. The FDA does this all the time. The most recent example of that, at least as it relates to abortion, is during the pandemic. They waived, at the time, there was a requirement that patients pick up mifepristone in person, and the FDA waived that temporarily during the pandemic, and then they ended up adopting that change permanently. So the FDA can do that, and it remains to be seen whether or not they're actually going to do that. But there is actually a route to keep mifepristone on the market no matter what happens with the courts that would be totally legal and above board. Outside of that, yeah, governors are talking about stockpiling. Some of them are stockpiling mifepristone. Some of them are stockpiling misoprostol, which is that other drug that's used for medication abortion, so that they're prepared if people have to rely only on that second pill. And then, of course, people already order abortion pills online that get shipped in from overseas, mostly from India. So they would theoretically be able to continue doing that unless conservatives get really serious about reanimating the Comstock Act, which is basically a zombie law from 1873 that's still on the books. And the judge in Texas and the Fifth Circuit both cited that law in their opinions. And if the anti-abortion movement is really going after Comstock, we should all be really concerned about that, because a resurrection of that law has the potential to ban all abortion, not just medication abortion, and contraception, as well as healthcare and freedom of expression for LGBTQ people. So the fact that they're trying to lean really hard into that law from 1873, which banned the mailing of materials that were considered obscene, should really concern us for many, many reasons.
It sounds like it. I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, because clearly, again, those on the right don't have a problem leaning very easily into this fascism and taking away the rights that they claim to want to uphold for themselves. And let me leave you with this, because there has, I won't say always, but from where I sit, and I might have this wrong, and correct me if I do, but it seems to be a bit of an enthusiasm gap between the pro-life movement or the pro-life anti-choice versus the pro-choice people. And given the state of things where we're seeing pregnant people's rights, I mean, we're talking tens of millions of women and girls and folks with the ability to get pregnant whose literal right to their bodies has been stripped away from them right in front of us, not in a history book, not in a place far, far away. No, like right here, right now. And I don't think people are losing their shit enough about this, Garnet. And some of it I take as potential like blue state apathy, where people who live in states that have easy access, convenient, constant access to abortion services are sort of looking at the red states in the South and in the Midwest as like, oh, well, sucks for them that they don't have access to this. Maybe they should have voted better. Maybe they should vote Democrat. It seems to be sort of this looking down upon, or a lack of true empathy, I think, for what pregnant folks are experiencing in these abortion restrictive states. Do you see it that way? Is there an enthusiasm gap, and does it sort of break down along red state, blue state lines?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that organizers in those quote unquote red states or even the purple states that have banned abortion are doing incredible, really radical culture shifting work in their own communities. And they are totally looked down upon by self congratulatory people in so called blue states who think that we've got it all right because abortion is still legal here. I think you're absolutely right. There's an empathy gap. There is certainly an element of racism there, in my opinion, considering, again, that we're talking about a lot of states, particularly in the South, which with large Black populations, also states like Texas with large Latino populations, and white people in the Northeast and on the West Coast who think they got it all figured out. And I think people like that should have empathy for people living in red states, absolutely. I think they also should understand that they need to be afraid for themselves, actually. For example, like I said, with the Comstock Act, if conservatives are serious about resurrecting that, that is going to affect us all. And I used the example of the FDA having discretion over how it enforces the law. Well, yes, the FDA could decide not to enforce restrictions on mifepristone now, but the second a Republican is in the White House, that's going to change, right? And we could be looking at a national medication abortion ban easily, if not a total national abortion ban. So I think people in blue states definitely, if you're thinking you're okay because you live in a blue state, you got another thing coming.
I'm thinking specifically of Virginia here, folks. The Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, wants to institute a 15-week ban on abortion. And later this year, all the houses, all the seats in the Virginia General Assembly or the House of Delegates and the Virginia State Senate are going to be up for grabs. And the Republicans are going to make a major push to get control back of the Virginia State Legislature because they have a governor there that is willing to sign a ban into law. So the organizing, the political education, it still needs to continue around this issue. Garnet, thank you so much for making some time, and I appreciate your expertise in your reporting following this travesty of not only justice, of autonomy, of human rights that is unfolding right here in front of us in the United States in the 21st century. I appreciate your work.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
You guys, we've been speaking with Garnet Henderson. She writes for Rewire News, which is an outlet that focuses on reproductive justice and access. And you can find Garnet's podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's called Access, a podcast about abortion. We appreciate Garnet Henderson making some time today. Hey, Status Couers, I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you all so much. Be sure to hit the like button if you are in the place. I know everybody doesn't have a uterus, okay? But chances are you have some proximity to uterus, yeah? Or you would like to have some proximity to uterus. You need to care about the uteruses, okay? I don't like these. I don't like this. I don't like how some of y'all fell off out the conversation. As soon as the conversation go to uteruses, motherfuckers want to turn away. No, uteruses are very important. Be them yours, your mother's, your significant others, your child's. You need to be concerned about the status of people who have the ability to get pregnant, to have access to these things. So that is all very important. Do us a favor. If you're not already subscribed to Status Coup, take a moment to do so. Consider supporting the channel with some material support, because this kind of reporting done by all the amazing contributors and reporters, of course, heralded by the editor-in-chief here, Jordan Cheriton. I mean, the shit costs, okay? like bringing you live and direct on the ground reporting from East Palestine for a sustained amount of time after the mainstream and bigger outlets had far left and turned their back on East Palestine and places like Flint as well. Status Coup is there. Status Coup will continue to be there. And the way that Status Coup will continue to be there is if you guys decide to support with some material support. You can run the channel some super chats. You can do a variety of things. You can go to statuscoup.com/join, I believe, in order to become a sustaining member to the channel and plus get some access to some exclusive content. So please go to statuscoup.com/join and get it together. All right. All right. Is our second guest with us, Colin?
Yep, he's ready anytime.
Real Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okie dokie. So, guys, this week has been a bad one for justice for people who have been unarmed while murdered by the police. Now, the case that we saw happening in Kansas City with the 16-year-old who was shot by a homeowner, and the homeowner has now been charged, in my opinion, with not enough charges. That was brought about because of sustained organizing and pressure that the community was able to bring to bear, not only on the police, but the district attorney, the prosecutors in that area, for charges to even have been filed against that homeowner that shot that 16-year-old. If you could pop up that first piece for me, I think it's the DCist. So let me tell you guys about this really quick. So in Fairfax County, Virginia, 37-year-old Timothy Johnson allegedly stole a pair of sunglasses from the Nordstrom at the very ritzy Tyson's Corner Mall there in Northern Virginia. He was pursued by Fairfax County police, and he was murdered while running. The police officer was fired, and this week a grand jury in Fairfax County decided to issue a no true bill, indicating that they do not intend to pursue any criminal charges against the former police officer, again, who shot and murdered Timothy Johnson, who was unarmed, and his only alleged crime was that of stealing a pair of sunglasses from the mall. And such an outcome was also brought to bear this week in Akron, Ohio, where the 8 police officers there who fired over 90 shots, 46 of which struck and murdered Jayland Walker, there will be no charges for these officers as well. And as you can imagine, as we saw in the days and the weeks immediately following Jayland's murder, people in the streets of Akron turned out very big to make a lot of noise. And after this news came out, where there would be no charges against these 8 officers of the Akron Police Department, whom, by the way, whose identities we still don't know, who are still basically on paid vacation for murdering this unarmed Black man. I want us to hear, if we could, we're going to play the clip, Colin, first. I want us to hear, if we could, from one of the community leaders there in Akron, Reverend Raymond Green Jr., who represents the Black-led organizing coalition, also known as Freedom Bloc. And let's listen to some of the words that Reverend Green had to say.
I love each and every last one of you.
Hey, no, I'm not sure why that didn't have audio.
Oh, okay, no worries. Sorry, can you guys hear my dog barking? She doesn't want to. She's very. I don't know what she's doing, but so I actually did hear audio on that call, and it just stopped.
Oh, you heard it? Let me try.
Oh.
I love each and every last one of you. No justice. No peace. Period. There wouldn't be no justice in Akron, no peace in Akron, Ohio. There would be no peace in Summit County. There would be no peace in the state of Ohio. There would be no peace in America until Black men are able to walk down the street without being gunned down. Until Black men are able to wake up and walk outside without the fear of being murdered by state-sanctioned violence. We will not rest. I am not here to condone violence, but I am saying that you have a right to be righteously indignant from these results today. Anger is an emotion that is felt when a wrong is done to you. And this wrong is done to us too many times. To the city of Akron, board up everything that you want to do, but we are coming. To my friends, to my brothers, to Black men, we need you. To the gang members in the city of Akron, we need you. There is one clear and present enemy in this city, in this county, in this state, and in this country, and their name is Jim and Jane Crow, and we will not rest until we put them to bed. I'm not here to condone violence, but I am here to say that we will take back our community by any means necessary. It is up to us. We can no longer wait on an administration. We can no longer wait on the police department that is trained to shoot a person 100 times until they no longer have life in their body. We will not rest. I am giving you an invitation, if you didn't have one, to join in on this fight. We will continue to register to vote. We will continue to run candidates. We will continue to take over the administration in an electoral manner. But Akron, Summit County, Bath, Greene, Hudson, we are coming.
You can check this.
Powerful words there from Reverend Green. And actually, we are joined right now with Reverend Raymond Green Jr. He is the leader of Freeding Bloc, Black-led organizing coalition out of Akron. Reverend Green, thank you so much for making time to join us today on Status Coup.
How are you?
I'm inspired by listening to the words that you just preached there. And I know this was devastating news for the community to receive, that these 8 officers, not a single one of them will be criminally indicted or charged in any way for murdering Jayland Walker. And I was watching some of the press coverage, including the Ohio Attorney General Yost and the the Akron police chief. And the one thing they kept coming back to is that Jayland allegedly fired first. And that really bothered me because, as it has been easily proven, Jayland was unarmed when these police began unloading on him. He didn't have a weapon on him at all. And if, as the police alleged, he did fire at them, it seems as though he fired a single shot at them and was not even in close proximity to his weapon when the police began shooting 90 bullets in Jaden's direction. Obviously, this was murder by excessive force. And I would imagine that the community sees it that way also.
Yeah. What you see is a country that is living off the principles of Die Hard and, all the movies that we make where, we're on a set and somebody can drive 80 miles per hour and still shoot a gun behind them. And we know that's movies, but for somehow, our Attorney General and police create the narrative that happens in real life. But this was not a movie. This was a young man that was out working, door dashing, who either didn't know he had a tail light out or couldn't afford to get the tail light fixed, and was accosted, chased, and murdered by the Akron Police Department. And what they want to do is make us believe that he was Bruce Willis in Die Hard 2 and was doing 80 on the highway shooting backwards, and we had to put him down. And for a certain part of our population, that's a believable story. And then for us that are realists and understand what really happens, most of America has guns, whether it's legal or illegal. We know that scenario is not possible. So what we have to do is understand that scenario is not possible, continue to fight and get the real truth out in the real story and change the policies and the procedures that allows this to happen.
And it's continually stunning to see, especially in states like Ohio that are open carry, where so many Black men specifically have been murdered by police just for being in proximity of a gun, not even pointing a weapon or trying to harm any officers in any way. I'm thinking about John Crawford II, who was murdered in a Walmart by police while handling a legal gun available for retail sale. And of course, the devastating case about what happened to 12-year-old Tamir Rice, who was handling a BB gun, again, in an open carry state where white people and white children routinely carry guns out in public. But when Black people do it, it's cause enough for alarm that the police respond as though there is an imminent threat to the community. This overreaction for people exercising their constitutional rights. How does these conversations play out amongst those that you are in community with when speaking to the elected power structure about why are people being treated differently for a law that is supposed to apply equally to all Ohioans?
Yeah, I think the way we approach this conversation, have to continue to approach this conversation, is the understanding that it's not an overreaction. It is the reaction that they have been conditioned to do. We have to understand the history of the police department as slave catchers. We have to understand the history of the Second Amendment to arm people to be able to catch slaves. And when you take those two things, what you begin to understand is that it was never meant for Black people to have guns. It was never meant for Black people to have rights, let alone guns. So when that image in your head and you're barred up under that image, and then you go to the military and that image continues to be put into your body, into your being, and then you join the police department that nails it in, and you only contact that you have with Black people is through the news and media and read a newspaper, then you see this isn't an overreaction. This is the reaction. This is how law enforcement, this is how white people are conditioned to see Black people as a threat. And this capitalist society that we have, this white supremacist society that we have, we even have Black people that have been conditioned to this. That's what we've seen in Tennessee with the Black officers. This is about conditioning. This is about implicit bias. This is about the foundation of what this country was built on, which is violence, particularly violence against minority people. So it's actually not an overreaction. What it is a reaction to what has always been. And what we have to do is begin to change the narrative and create a different world that makes all human beings equal under the protection of the Constitution and of the law. And those are the conversations that I try to have with people is bringing humanity back into the conversation, bringing humanity back into the scenario, and understanding that what we have right now is just 400 years of conditioning of Black people are a problem and don't have any rights and don't belong here.
Reverend, I'm glad you talked about history because I'd like for you to provide some additional context for everyone. What is Akron like racially in terms of its racial demographic makeup? And also, what is the racial makeup of the Akron Police Department? And historically, how has that department, even though I think I already know the answer, but I would appreciate if you would kind of enlighten us to have people have a better idea about what this looks like in Akron specifically, about the ways that the police have engaged with the non-white community, with the Black and brown community in your town.
Well, so it's a couple things. First thing, Akron is 30% Black. We're in Summit County. Summit County is 15% Black. Part of Summit County is a town called Barberton, which is 2 minutes away from Akron. And in the 1920s, the early 1920s, Barberton had over 500,000 Ku Klux Klan members, the second largest Ku Klux Klan contingency next to Texas at that time. So those people didn't just leave; they infiltrated our school systems and our police department. Our police department has historically been racist. They've been racist since its inception. It has been in a retirement place for white military. Right now, we're at about 8% Black people on the police force, with a hard time recruiting Black people and people in general to be on our police force. So we have always had a problem in Akron. I could talk about Jeffrey Stevens, who was a registered legal gun owner, who had a block party on his street, and as some altercations broke out, he got his gun to protect his family, and then called the police, and the police drove up and shot him and killed him. So this place has always been a racist place, from our school system to our police department. And right now, what we're doing at the Freedom Block is working to change those dynamics, working to arm our people not only with knowledge, but with the understanding of what the system is, and then ensuring that we begin to protect ourselves, and with the understanding that we are the ones that keep us safe. We need to engage with our community, engage with our young people, engage with our gangs, get them the knowledge that allows for us to protect ourselves and keep the police out of our community.
I mean, and you're describing a level of political education that really all communities need. But I'm so encouraged to see and hear that this kind of work is happening in Akron. And let's talk about what that organizing looks like, especially in the wake of this travesty. And I know that I'm certain the expectations were low. that you all didn't expect an indictment of these police officers, because we know for every Derek Chauvin, for a police that is convicted of murdering an unarmed Black person, there are probably dozens more that even never get charged, never even think about getting charged, because oftentimes these murders are justified not only by grand juries, but even prosecutors who are unwilling to even pursue those kinds of charges. So when it comes to educating the community about what to do about the police, there's constant talk, especially on the left. Well, not, let me not say the left. Let me say by Democrats. Let me say there's constant talk by Democrats about police reform, and that the police just need better training, more funding, more access to resources, so the police do not engage in racial profiling and murdering of unarmed Black folks. But reform is not realistic here, because, as you said, Reverend, this is what the police are trained to do, and this is how they are trained to operate. So talk to me about what organizing and political education around this issue looks like in Akron.
It's mainly around we have everything we need in our community, and actuating those resources, actuating that talent that's inside of our community to create the systems that we need, understanding and redefining crime, having conversations around crime. What is the crime? And really asking that question from a humanity standpoint. Is crime the single mother who lost her job and goes to steal for Family Dollar? Is crime the mother who works 2 jobs and still can't pay her rent, so she goes to prostitution, or she goes to check fraud? Is the crime the man that can't get a job and he starts selling drugs? Or is the crime that there's no living wage jobs? Is the crime that there's not enough jobs for every American and we need a guaranteed income system? It's the crime that housing is not affordable and we have a minimum wage as opposed to a living wage. And really just redefining crime. What is the crime here? Is the crime that we got millionaires and then we got 80% of the population under the poverty level? What is the crime? And what we're trying to do is really redefine what crime is, to get everybody to understand that actually there's systems set up that makes crime profitable for the people that set up the system. And through redefining crime, we're able to create solutions inside of our communities. We're able to build daycares where you have a mother who can't work, and we're able to pay her to watch the people's kids that does have to go to work. And now she's able to make some income with her supplemental income to allow her to get through. But then a single mother is not paying $300 a week for childcare, spending her whole time at work just to pay for childcare, still can't feed her kid. So we have to create those alternative systems, but then we have to do the political education and develop the leaders that can then get into city council and change the structure, that can then get into the mayor's office and change some of the policies, that can then run for senator and run for governor, and these things that allows for us to create a more equitable system based off the lowest people on the totem pole, which is Black people.
Do Black people in Akron have political allies? Do they have people that are in elected office that understand the problem, that understand that just throwing more money at the police is not going to remedy anything? And it sounds as though that your organization is interested in identifying and developing people who will seek those local offices that can potentially make some changes at the policy level. Is there anybody currently doing that is elected in Akron? And if not, do we have plans to get those people in place? Because I believe the Akron Police Department just recently received a boost in funding. And I'm certain that the people of Akron do not want the police to have more money just to come out here and shoot unarmed folks who are working and just simply trying to live their lives and, abiding by their own constitutional rights to carry, etc. So who is helping people that is already there elected in Akron?
So it's mainly a grassroots effort. We have people on the ground. We're developing allies on the ground. We have a couple people in city council, like our council person, Russ Neal, our county council person, Veronica Sims. We currently just got Amelia Sykes elected to Congress. So we have those people, and then we have a slate of people that we're endorsing and running for city council and mayor this year. And then we're building leaders that's going to run for precinct captains next year. So we're building that allyship. We have a couple people in the administration, a couple people in office that we're working with. But mainly it's a grassroots effort where we're raising up a new leadership, a younger leadership that allows for us to bring fresh ideas and really look at this government from a humanity aspect. I don't think anybody has ever looked at government from a humanity aspect. And I think that's what we got to start doing, is looking at this from a humanity aspect. And how do people live? How do we allow people to be their full selves and begin to create policies that foster that ideology?
You know, this case surrounding Jayland today, specifically on social media, among right-wing talking heads, they were really grotesquely celebrating the fact that these officers were not going to be charged at all. And one of the things that these folks were pointing out is that, you know, there is a gun violence problem amongst Black youth in a lot of cities. And why do Black people get so upset when the police don't get charged when murdering an unarmed person, when Black kids are doing a lot of shooting within their own communities? But the point that they intentionally miss is that people who commit crimes like murder in Black communities, so-called Black on Black crime, those people get arrested. Those people get prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and they go to jail for a very long time. We don't see that when it's state violence against Black folks. What would you say to those that intentionally want to play that hypocritical game and discuss gun violence through the lens without factoring in the way that police and state violence is completely sanctioned against Black folks?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing with that is I don't engage in those conversations. Those conversations actually get us nowhere, because that's about you're having a conversation with a person that is ignorant for the sake of being ignorant. And then what we want to do is help, people understand what the crime is. When you have an education system that teaches people how to be robots, don't teach our kids how to read. Teach them geared towards passing the test as opposed to how to read and how to count. But more importantly, when you have an education system that doesn't teach people how to have conversations, doesn't teach people how to have conflict resolution skills, this is what you get. And then you cut off the resources to that community. And then everything is on TV is about glorifying being a billionaire and having this money and having this mansion. What you're creating is a powder keg for the violence that you see in poor communities. Because not only do you see crime in poor Black communities, white on white crime is higher than Black on Black crime. What we have to understand is violence is a proximity issue. People hurt people that's close to them. And in the Black community, we're all struggling for finite resources. And that's where the killing comes. When you have no conflict resolution skills and you have no resources, people figure it out on their own. And that figuring out on their own is what they've been taught through the history of this country. When the first white man came over here and took it from the Indians and said it was his, and he did it by violence. And that violence continued to be perpetuated throughout history, through the Revolutionary War, through Reconstruction. That violence continues to be perpetuated through war. White kids turn 18 years old and they graduate and they go to military and they're celebrated. Black kids turn 18 years old, they graduate, they go to the streets, and they're in the same war zone that we send our white kids to, but they're not getting demeaned, because if we go to another country and kill another country, that country is probably killing, our country is probably killing another country that has dark-skinned people, then that's okay. But when dark-skinned people kill dark-skinned people, it becomes a problem. So what we do, we live in a war country, but only people that can control the war, only people that can have war, only people that can initiate war is white people. And that's why the Black on Black crime comes up so much, is because how dare Black people take the initiative to feed themselves the way we have fed ourselves forever, whether it's through the violence in the military or the violence in the state house. It's been violence amongst our community through guns and through legislation. So I really don't, I try not to engage in those conversations, because what I just said goes over those kind of people's heads. But I do try to articulate for our people why that is and how do we solve that problem. And the way we solve that problem is by inviting those kids in and creating a system where they feel welcome, and creating a community where they feel welcome, that allows us all to figure out how we can eat in the systems that's not designed for us to eat.
Reverend Green, what is the ways that people can engage with your work and follow you on social media?
Freedomblock.org, FreedomBloc.org. You can follow us on social media at Freedom Block with Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Or you can email us at freedom@freedomblock.org, FREEDOM at THEFREEDOMBLOC.org. And we would love to work with anybody that's trying to make our communities better, not only in Akron, but across the country. This is a united front. We're dealing with the same issues in all of our urban Black communities and all of our low-income white communities to trailer parks. We are dealing with the same issues, and we must all come together and take the focus off of race and put it back on humanity, understanding that we must follow Black leadership to get to that place of humanity.
Absolutely. Brilliantly said. We've been joined with Reverend Raymond Green Jr., leader and community organizer from Freedom Bloc, Black-led organizing coalition. Thank you so much, Reverend. We appreciate you making time today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You do the same. Thank you so much. Coming to us live all the way from Akron, everybody. So thank you so much to Reverend Green. Hey, Status Coers. Thank you to Carpe Diem for your super chat support. Appreciate that, Carpe Diem. Thank you to Latif for your support as well, Latif, as always. Colin, did I miss any other super chats? Possibly.
No, that was everything.
Oh, look at that. See, obviously. Then say hi to Colin, everybody. I want to see waves in the chat. Say hi, Colin. This thing don't move without Colin, everybody. He's the engine, pushing the buttons, doing the things. Anyway, so I appreciate you all joining us today on Status Coup. Please continue to subscribe and follow and become a member. Go to Status Coup News on Twitter, follow the thing, Facebook, everywhere. Because as you saw right before we went on air, the interview that Jordan had with the resident there from East Palestine, who had the exclusive audio of the Norfolk Southern CEO, like, oh, you guys are breathing in benzene, huh? Sucks for you. I mean, we are living in the upside down, you guys. The dystopia is here. It's not coming. The upside down living part of the thing, of the reality that we find ourselves in, we are in it right now. So Status Quo is one of the places that is telling you the truth. That is bringing you the unvarnished news, the anti-capitalist news, to let you know what the fuck time it really is. So please join, subscribe, support, share, comment, do all the things here at Status Coup. And you can do something for me as well. You can head on over to my channel, Burn It Down with Kim Brown. We do the live show every Tuesday and Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. I talk a lot about cops. I talk a lot about, trigger warning for sexual assault and sexual violence. I center Black women. So if you actually wonder what Black women think about certain things, my channel is probably the place that you want to come kick it at. It's Burn It Down with Kim Brown on YouTube. I thank you all so much for your support. Special thanks, of course, to Jordan and Colin. And Zaina, of course, for doing the thing. We certainly appreciate it. And you guys can tune in back here. Keep all your notifications and bells on for the latest content available on Status Quo. I will holler at you guys in a couple of weeks. See you later. Bye-bye. Rough.